The hall smelled of marble and perfume. Heir still enough to make guilt sound louder. Elara Voss, heir to a dynasty built on silence, entered the courtroom like she owned its echo, perfume blooming, in the cold air. Yet her hand trembled before she touched the desk. Her heels struck marble like small hammers of certainty. Every sound told the same story. Some people were born on the winning side of fairness. Rafael Mirek, the mechanic's son, stood already waiting, wrists bound, a yellow ticket folded between his fingers. And for a man accused, he carried the quiet of someone who'd already forgiven. The crowd whispered his name like it was already a sentence. Reporters sharpened their pens as if justice could be written before it was heard. Someone laughed, quick, nervous, expensive. Elara looked up. Their eyes met like two truths that refused to share the same world. Then she smiled, not warm, not cruel, just certain. The certainty of someone who'd never been told no. A camera flashed. Its sound hung longer than the verdict still to come. He didn't flinch. He only pressed the ticket closer to his palm, as if ink and paper could still protect a man from memory. The judge hadn't entered yet, but justice already felt busy. The hum of the lights filled the silence where mercy should have lived. The air smelled of polished wood and fear. Time felt slower when power watched. Elara crossed her legs. Rafael closed his eyes. Both looked calm. Only one of them truly was. The door opened. Leather shoes, slow and deliberate, crossed the floor. And somewhere between the sound of those steps and the weight of that silence, the balance of the room began to change. Outside, the city moved without caring. Engines groaned in the distance, rain pressed against glass, and somewhere a clock kept time for no one in particular. Before the cuffs, Rafael had lived by that clock. Mornings of oil, sweat, and radio static. He fixed the engines of men who never saw his face. They left tips in silence, and he learned that dignity doesn't make noise. The ticket in his hand wasn't a memory. It was a compass. His father had written on the back, "Do right," even when they don't. The ink had faded, but the truth hadn't. In another part of the city, light never flickered. Elara Voss woke each morning to glass ceilings she never had to break. She had her father's lawyers, her mother's name, and a life so polished it reflected nothing. She'd been told the world was fair, because it had always been fair to her. When the watch went missing, she didn't doubt the story her circle whispered. It must have been him. No evidence, just certainty disguised as logic. Now she sat only 20 feet from the man her family once fired in silence. The marble between them felt like history refusing to die. The prosecutor shuffled his notes. The defense lawyer checked his watch. Two professionals practicing neutrality, but the tension had a scent. Cold, metallic, like rain waiting to fall. Rafael lifted his eyes once. The judge's chair was still empty. He wondered how many men had stood there before him, believing truth alone could save them. He exhaled and slow, controlled. A prayer without sound. Elara's gaze followed that breath. For a second, the courtroom felt smaller, almost human. But comfort doesn't last long where guilt lives rent-free. A door creaked. Footsteps paused behind the bench. The murmurs stopped. And as the light struck the judge's seat, everyone straightened. Justice was about to wear a face. The first thing the prosecutor did was smile. Not from joy, from certainty. Certainty has a rhythm too, and it sounds like papers sliding across polished wood. He spoke of evidence, of footage, of proof that couldn't possibly lie. A grainy screen flickered to life, time-stamped, sterile, humming. The courtroom lights dimmed just enough to make faces look honest. There it was, Rafael Mirek near the corridor where the watch had disappeared. The image froze mid-motion, his shadow caught between two frames. Guilt by proximity. Missing footage, the prosecutor said, tapping the timestamp. 1 minute, 23 seconds. No one asked why. No one ever does when a story already fits the ending they want. Elara's eyes didn't leave the screen. She looked at the blur of his body like it confirmed everything she believed about fairness. And yet, in that frozen still, he didn't look like a thief. He looked like a man carrying too much silence. The defense lawyer stood, young, voice trembling through principle. He spoke of blind spots, corrupt security systems, missing reports. His words fell like raindrops against marble, clean but too soft to leave a mark. Rafael watched without blinking. He'd seen men lie with smiles before. He'd seen the truth drown under paperwork. Still, he stood straight, as if gravity itself refused to bend him. Elara crossed her legs again. Her bracelet clicked softly, a small, perfect sound in a room pretending to be just. The judge's chair was no longer empty. Judge Caprio sat quietly, hands clasped, eyes fixed not on the footage but on the man in front of it. Something in his posture had changed. The faint recognition of an echo he hadn't expected to hear again. The gavel didn't move. The silence did, and for the first time that morning, justice looked unsure of itself. The rain outside had turned to mist, the kind that hides the world without erasing it. Inside, the courtroom glowed under white light, too clean to feel honest. The defense rose again, holding a single folder. Old documents, employment logs, a list of names erased from the factory archives of the Voss family. Your Honor, the young lawyer said, these records show the defendant's father once worked for the same estate. Dismissed after filing a safety complaint. The same week, an internal report vanished. The prosecutor objected before the words could breathe. Irrelevant to the case, he said, calm, confident. Dead men don't testify. Rafael didn't move. His eyes flickered, not at the insult, but at the word dead. Across the room, Elara stiffened. Her bracelet pressed against her wrist until the skin beneath turned white. Something old, something buried, stirred in the sound of that name. Judge Caprio tilted his head slightly, not toward the objection, but toward memory. He remembered another courtroom, another man standing alone with nothing but truth for armor. He remembered Rafael Mirek. The gavel didn't fall. Instead, silence took its place. Thick, heavy, waiting to see who would break first. Objection sustained, the prosecutor repeated, but his voice carried less authority now. Elara looked down. Her father's lawyers had warned her never to speak of that year. The accident, the worker's injury, the hush money. They said the past was handled, but the past never forgets the sound of injustice. In the gallery, someone coughed, a small sound, but it rippled like a confession. Rafael's lawyer tried again, quieter this time. If this courtroom is about truth, then the roots of that truth matter. What a man's father lost may explain what his son has been accused of taking. The judge's fingers brushed the gavel. He didn't strike. Not yet. Elara's breath caught. For the first time, she didn't know which side of the law she was on, and in that hesitation, the entire balance of power trembled. No one expected him to speak. Men in chains rarely do. The world trains them to stay small. But when Rafael lifted his head, the air changed. It wasn't defiance. It was remembrance. He didn't ask for mercy. He told a story about a factory floor that smelled of smoke and oil, about a man who refused to sign a lie, about a bribe left on a desk and a pair of hands that pushed it back. He said his father taught him that silence can be guilt too, and that some truths once spoken will never let you sleep again. The words weren't loud, but they carried, like a tremor under polished marble. Even the microphones seemed unsure whether to breathe. Elara watched him, unmoving. The smile she had worn that morning now felt borrowed, like an heirloom from a past she didn't earn. Her bracelet clicked once, twice, then stopped, the rhythm of certainty cracking. The prosecutor rose, objection forming. But his voice arrived late, as if the room no longer belonged to him. The judge didn't interrupt. He only listened. Rafael's voice grew softer. He spoke of nights fixing engines for men who'd never thank him, of a father who lost work but never dignity, of a promise he made beside a hospital bed, that he'd never trade truth for comfort. Silence followed, deep enough to hear someone's breath catch in the back row. Elara's eyes lowered. Her father's name hung unspoken between them, a ghost that wore their wealth like armor. Then Rafael said the line that would haunt her. My father was fired for telling the truth. Today I stand here accused for living it. No one moved. The judge's hand hovered over the gavel but didn't fall. The prosecutor stared at the papers in front of him, as if words could rearrange themselves into decency. Outside, thunder rolled, low, delayed, inevitable. Inside, every heartbeat waited for the echo. And when the silence finally broke, it wasn't with a sound. It was with the quiet understanding that the balance of power had just shifted. For a long time, no one spoke. Even the hum of the light seemed to fade, as if the room itself needed to listen. Judge Caprio adjusted his glasses, slow, deliberate, and looked not at the lawyer, not at the screen, but at Rafael. The kind of look that remembers something it shouldn't. When he finally spoke, his voice didn't sound like authority. It sounded like memory. "Mr. Mirek," he said quietly, "I knew your father." The room stiffened. The words didn't echo, they landed. The prosecutor opened his mouth, then closed it. Elara froze mid-breath. Caprio continued, not as a judge, but as a man haunted by a debt. He told them about a hearing years ago, a factory dispute, a man who refused to take a bribe, who'd rather lose his job than his honor. He remembered how Samuel Mirek had stood in that same courtroom, hands trembling, eyes clear, and how that honesty had saved Caprio's own career when corruption tried to pull him under. His voice softened. "He once said to me, 'The law doesn't need to be perfect, just brave enough to admit when it's wrong.' I have never forgotten that." No one breathed. Elara's bracelet slipped down her wrist, hit the desk and stayed there. A single metallic sound swallowed by silence. She stared at Rafael like seeing him for the first time. The judge leaned back, the weight of decades in his eyes. And now his son stands here, accused of dishonesty. If that's true, he paused, the silence stretching thin, then I've learned nothing from the man who once saved me. The gavel didn't strike. The sound came from somewhere deeper, the collapse of certainty. Elara's eyes glistened. She didn't wipe the tear. Truth has a way of disarming the powerful, quietly, without permission. For a heartbeat, no one remembered the watch. They only remembered the man who refused to lie, and the son who carried his silence like proof. And in that stillness, justice began to look human again. No verdict yet, only breathing, uneven, shared, fragile. Elara's bracelet lay on the desk between her and the truth. It caught the light like a confession that wanted to be seen. Her lawyer whispered something, but she didn't hear it. The hum of the air vents blurred into her heartbeat, and for the first time in her life, the courtroom didn't feel like protection. It felt like exposure. Rafael stood motionless, gaze fixed somewhere beyond her, as if forgiveness were a horizon he wasn't sure he deserved. He hadn't won anything. He'd just refused to lose himself. Elara reached for the bracelet, then stopped. Her hand hovered, trembling. When she finally spoke, her voice was too soft for defiance, too heavy for denial. "There was an accident," she said, "years ago. At the factory, my father told them to keep it quiet." Her words fell like slow rain, not dramatic, just real. "Your father wouldn't sign the false report. He told the truth, and we buried it." No one moved. The prosecutor lowered his pen. Judge Caprio's hand covered his mouth. The silence that followed wasn't courtroom silence anymore. It was mourning. Elara's breath broke on the edge of her next sentence. "I thought justice was a birthright. I never knew it was something you had to earn." The bracelet rolled off the desk and hit the floor. A soft, hollow sound, a fall too quiet for the cameras to care about, but everyone heard it. Rafael's eyes didn't accuse. They only softened, not with pity, but with understanding. Because some apologies don't need to be accepted, they just need to be heard. The judge finally exhaled, a sound half prayer, half surrender. The courtroom didn't applaud. It simply breathed again. Outside, the rain had stopped. Light began to push through the windows. Hesitant, like mercy testing its own strength. And as Elara bowed her head, her smile was gone, replaced by something rarer, the courage to feel small in the presence of truth. The bracelet still rested on the floor, a single circle of light. No one moved to pick it up. Judge Caprio leaned forward, elbows on the bench, hands clasped as if steadying the weight of every verdict he had ever given. He looked at Rafael, then at Elara, and for a moment it seemed the law itself was trying to remember how to breathe. When he spoke, his tone carried neither triumph nor pity, only balance. "There are times when guilt hides behind power," he said, "and times when innocence hides behind silence." He paused, letting the words settle like dust over marble. "Today, the evidence does not prove theft. What it proves is courage, and that is something this court will never condemn." The prosecutor lowered his eyes. Elara covered her face, and Rafael simply stood, not victorious, not proud, just free of the weight that never belonged to him. Caprio lifted the gavel. It hung in the air for a second longer than custom allowed. Then soft strike, not the sound of punishment. The sound of mercy landing gently. Case dismissed, no applause. Only the sound of rain returning outside, tapping glass like gratitude. Caprio looked down at the bench. There, beside his notes, lay the faded parking ticket Rafael had carried. He turned it over, read the words written years ago. Do right, even when they don't. He folded it once, carefully, and placed it beside the gavel. Your father was right, he whispered. Elara rose, eyes swollen, and gathered the bracelet from the floor. She didn't put it back on. She left it on the desk, a quiet surrender of everything that used to define her. Rafael exhaled for the first time in years. The hall smelled different now. Rain, paper, and something clean. Not victory. Closure. And as the courtroom emptied, justice stayed behind, no longer cold, just quietly human. The courtroom emptied, but the silence stayed. It clung to the walls like the ghost of something sacred. Justice had not shouted that day. It had whispered. And sometimes that's the only way truth can be heard. Outside, the sky had cleared, pale, forgiving. Rafael stepped into it, not as a man proven right, but as one finally understood. He still carried his father's words in his pocket, still carried the grease under his fingernails, still carried the memory of a name that once meant nothing in rooms built for power. Elara followed behind, a few steps slower. No cameras, no statements, just a woman learning how to live without pretending to be innocent. People passed them on the courthouse steps, unaware that mercy had just changed its meaning. Truth had cost everyone something. Rafael had lost years of peace. Elara had lost the illusion of her family's perfection. And Judge Caprio, he had lost the comfort of distance. But what remained was cleaner than justice. A kind of stillness that felt like respect. The world wouldn't remember the case. But somewhere in the quiet corners of their lives, each of them would remember how it felt to stand in a room where truth didn't need to win, only to be seen. And that sight, that single moment of shared humanity, was enough to make even the law seem capable of grace. The hall smelled of marble again, but softer now, like a memory rinsed clean. Same floor, same echo. Different weight. Elara Voss walked out first. No cameras followed. She paused at the doorway, sunlight cutting across her face. For a second, she almost smiled, not from pride, but relief. The kind that asks forgiveness without saying it aloud. Rafael Mirek stepped after her. No cuffs this time. Only the faint imprint they'd left behind. A reminder of how silence can bruise. They didn't speak. Didn't need to. Some truths become too pure for words once they've survived the noise. At the bottom of the courthouse steps, rainlight glimmered on stone. The city kept moving, unbothered, but quieter, as if it too had heard something worth respecting. Judge Caprio watched from the window above, gavel resting beside the folded ticket. The words on it faced upward now. The handwriting faint but unbroken. Do right even when they don't. He closed his eyes. Let the silence have the last word. Outside, Elara turned once, a glance, almost a bow, before walking into the brightness that had once made her untouchable. Rafael watched her disappear into it. Then he looked down at his hands, opened them, and felt what freedom actually weighed. Light, but not empty. The same hall that had begun with arrogance now ended in grace, where a smile once humiliated, a silence now redeemed, and as the screen faded to white, a single line lingered, soft, final, certain. Justice becomes cinema when silence speaks louder than the gavel.